Hello everyone, my name's Samantha and I'm doing Foundation and Level 1 for Statistics and Probability. The prior knowledge for this would be very little, only because with Statistics and Probability it's not usually known in Foundation because they haven't really learnt how to collect data properly or not, so this is the first step for them. But for Level 1 they'd have to be able to accurately collect data using yes, no, maybe questions and fill out a table for it. The Ausvals would be for Foundation with Statistics and Probability under the heading of Data Representation and Interpretation would be to answer yes or no questions after they've collected some information. Level 1 would be very similar, however, just a different change with the wording. So with chance, instead of using yes, no, or maybe, they'll be using will happen, won't happen, might happen. And then for data representation and interpretation, it would be being able to do tables with drawings so that they can identify the difference for those. So with my activity, as a warm-up activity, which the kids wouldn't really understand at first as to why we're doing it, could be a game of snakes and ladders. This is getting their mind thinking. It's a fun little way to get them started. They all get excited. And it's a way that they don't actually know they're learning about chance. However, there are sections of chance in there, like rolling the dice. They wouldn't know that every time they roll it, there's a chance of what number they're going to get, which can be explained further after they've finished the activity. And then also a chance of whether they'll land on a ladder or a snake. So once they're finished, you can have them go through, sit down and have a look at if they're placed on one certain part of the board, what would be more likely for them to land on next? Would it be a ladder or a snake? So that gets them thinking about the different strategies they'd need to use, and then also gets them thinking about what number they'd need to roll on the dice next, just to avoid exactly what they didn't want. So now on to the main activity that we'll be doing in this class. It's a question sheet with yes or no questions. There are 8 on there, and what the students are going to have to do is answer which one they think is correct. And then at the end, they'll finish off the table as I've stated, but that will be later explained. So once the students have done that, we'll have a class discussion. And one question I want to ask is, which answer did you get for, if my mummy has another baby, it will be a girl? Yes, no, or maybe?
I chose because I want my mum to have a boy.
So you said no, your mum won't have a girl.
Yes.
Why?
Because I want a brother.
But do you get to choose?
No.
Exactly. So this is a misconception where the kids will think that because they want either a baby brother or a baby sister, they can say yes or no, without actually thinking that whatever they want, it's still a 50-50 chance, which means it's maybe. So with the 50-50 chance, you can then get a timeline and put 0%, 50% and 100% so that they can see the number relation between yes, no and maybe. And then to make it easier, you can get them to place this question on the line and make sure that they can understand that there is a 50-50 chance, so it's right in the middle. Once all the students have finished answering all the questions on the sheet, there's a table down the bottom that they'll have to fill out. For Foundation, all they have to do is write in the number of how many yeses, how many nos, and how many maybes there were, because they haven't been taught anything else yet, and this is just the starting block. For Level 1, what they'll have to do is they'll have to use picture representation to show the difference between yes, nos, and maybes. So as an example, I've done smiley faces, sad faces, and confused faces. So 2 smiley faces for yeses, 4 for no, and 2 for maybes, just to show the different representations and ways they can do it. This is open for students' creativity and can be used in many different ways. Once the students have finished with that, they will then have to go away and create their own questions, just to show that they've learned something during the class and they actually know what they're doing. So they'll have to create 2 yes questions, 2 no questions, and 2 maybe questions to then pass to a partner so that they can answer them themselves. This is so that they can apply their knowledge in different ways, and it also reinforces the learning. This is a good lesson because it can be easily assessed throughout the progress of the lesson and can also be used later in the year. It's also good to see whether they can become competent in creating their own yes, no, or maybe questions without being prompted by some in earlier years. This activity is also good because it enables the students to control their learning and they can make connections between everyday life and the classroom. It's also a fun activity to get the students active and participating in everything that they are doing, and also develops teamwork, which will be used during later years of teaching. Misconceptions may be when we're doing the dice activity that they believe that if they roll a 5 first, a 5 won't come up again until all of the other numbers have been rolled. This isn't true as they all have an equal chance in presenting themselves. Some students may answer baby questions like we saw Stefan did, with because he wants a baby boy, a baby brother, he's going to get one, whereas it's still a 50-50 chance whether it'll be a boy or a girl. This can be used as some of the other questions in the activity as well, as some students may want things to happen, so they answer that way instead of thinking about whether they will or won't happen in reality. Thank you.
For this part of the video, I'll be discussing levels 2 and 3 of statistics and probability. The prior knowledge that is required for level 2 is that students can accurately collect data using the phrases will happen, won't happen, and might happen. So with level 2, the learning objectives with the achievement standard are as follows. Students collect data from relevant questions to create lists, tables, and picture graphs with and without the use of digital technology. They interpret data in context. Students describe outcomes of familiar events using everyday language. Okay, so for level 2, the content descriptors state for chance to identify practical activities and everyday events that involve chance, to describe outcome as likely or unlikely, and identify some events as certain or impossible. This kind of takes on from the prior knowledge from level 1 and expands upon it. So classifying a list of everyday events according to how likely they are to happen, using the language of chance and explaining the reasoning is a way to do this. Alrighty, so for data representation and interpretation, the content descriptors state that students need to be able to identify a question of interest based on one categorical variable and gather data relevant to the question. They also are required to be able to collect, check, and classify data, and also create displays of data using lists, tables, and picture graphs, and be able to interpret them. Okay, so for level 3, the content descriptors state for the chance section that students need to be able to conduct chance experiments, identify and describe possible outcomes, and recognize a variation in results. And for data representation and interpretation, they are required to be able to identify questions or issues for categorical variables, identify data sources, and plan methods of data collection and recording. Also, collecting data, organize it into categories, and create displays using lists, tables, picture graphs, and simple column graphs. And they can use digital technologies as well. One more thing that they're required to do as well is to be able to interpret and compare data displays. This is interesting to consider the content descriptors because it can be applied perfectly to the following activity that I'm going to do with some students very shortly. That can be applied to both levels 2 and 3. Okay, so it's important to consider the content descriptors because it allows you to understand why I'll be applying the following activity to the content. Alright, so for this is my level 3 activity, and it is called Favourite Ice Cream Flavours. Now this requires a teacher to be addressing the class, and she's just going to write up a tally of each student's favourite ice cream flavour. Now just note that they can only put their hand up once for their favourite flavour, so they can't say strawberry and choc mint. They can only have one choice. Alright, so I'm going to use these 3 students here to get the point across, but usually you have more than just 3 students. Alright, so what is your favourite flavour?
Choc mint.
Excellent. I'm going to do a notch there. What is your favourite flavour?
Rainbow.
Rainbow. Excellent. Patrick, what is your favourite flavour?
Rainbow.
Rainbow. Very good. Alright, so as you can see, I've only got 3 students here, but I'd usually address the class and ask what their favourite flavour was, and then I'd plot it up on the graph here, or you'd get the students to go off and use this tally here and draw their own interpretation of the graph. And here is an example of what this activity can look like if it's done correctly. There we go. So there's an example of student work from the Osfeld's page, and it shows a student going off and drawing up the columns for the graph and having a good understanding of the name of each axis and what they each represent. They give the numbers for the vertical axis, and they also they put the categories for the titles at the bottom of the columns as well. So this shows a very good understanding of the topic. And for level 2, students just they can change the activity just a little bit by describing the outcomes of everyday activities. So they could be naming them as likely or unlikely, and they could also identify some events that are certain or impossible. So this activity was good because students had to complete a unit of work that included collecting data, drawing up tables and graphs, and discussing their findings compared with other students. So this students were given the task to explain their favourite ice cream flavour, and the teacher so-called explained it in front of the class, and they had to go off and write it up themselves. The teacher should explain, can you create a table and graph that show what these findings could look like, for example with the columns like it was showed up on the board before. Also, what type of graph is most suitable, and can you explain why? Also, how would you will you record your work? How can you explain the graph? And also, how do the results compare with others? So this is important for the students to be able to have a deeper understanding of the topic and explain it.